Hello and welcome everybody back to episode 4 of Talking Brazil Ball with me, James Brook, your host, and I'm here once again today with my co-host George. How are we doing today, George?
Yeah, all right, thanks, James. Yeah, episode 4, we're getting through them, aren't we, already? Yeah, we're racking them up. How are you doing? All right.
Yeah, I'm okay. Feeling a bit under the weather actually today, but gonna power through. Got to the end of the day now, just about, and gonna been looking forward to talking about some more Brazilian football. So hopefully that'll perk me up a little bit.
Yeah, well, if there's anything that can make you feel better, it's talking about a bit of Brazil ball, isn't it? So yeah, anybody in the comments wish James well, a speedy recovery for him.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, I think it's the cold, isn't it? Really, it's just been cold all the time.
Yeah,
So
well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, again, I'll say it again. It's cold here, but we can bring ourselves to a warmer climate with a bit of talk about these teams here.
yeah, you're absolutely right. So today, people, thank you to everybody who listened to last week's episode and the episode so far. So last week we looked at Sao Paulo, the clubs of Sao Paulo, and this week we're going to a climate perhaps even hotter than Sao Paulo. So we can pretend we're there, picture ourselves there. So George, you're usually good at introducing where we're heading. So would you like to tell the listeners and the watchers, hello to everybody watching on YouTube, where we're going today?
Yeah, well, we're going to Porto Alegre today, James. Yeah, a nice little venture over there for the evening. So join us if you want to. You've got a nice bit of incense going, haven't you? Yeah, nice. Looks a nice setting over there with you. So, yeah, Porto Alegre it is today.
That's it. So it's the 12th most inhabited city in Brazil. So it's a big city, but it's not one of the biggest. It is the southernmost. So it's the capital. We should just say there's two big clubs in Porto Alegre. So we're looking at Porto Alegre. We're also looking at the wider Rio Grande do Sul, which is the region. There's one club we're going to look at in there. So it's Porto Alegre is the southernmost capital state, so it's very very south, like we say, nice and kind of coastal as well, and it's a partner city with Paris, which is a funny little fact. I'm not really sure why that is, but or what that even means, to be honest. But yeah, it's partnered with Paris, Gay Paris,
Wow.
George. So make of that what you will.
Wow, it's a two excellent places, isn't it? And we say bonjour then, don't we, to the to any French people listening? And yeah, fantastic, great place is Paris, isn't it?
Paris, well, yeah, that's another episode into it. That's a
Well,
completely
it's a
that's a different podcast.
that's a yeah, absolutely. Talking French ball. That's
Well, let's
that's for
focus
them
on Brazil first.
to discuss. That's it, isn't it? So
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah. So it's like you said. I mean, you haven't introduced the teams yet, have you? Have we? So
No,
the
I was going to
teams.
ask you to do that next,
Ah,
actually. So there's
ah,
three teams we're going to look at. We've been trying to
yep.
focus on anybody who's been with us. We've been trying to focus on the clubs of Serie A for this upcoming 2024 season. And so we've been trying to separate them off into cities and regions just to make it kind of manageable, digestible. So previously we've looked at 4 different clubs in each episode. Today we're going to look at just 3. So, George, yeah, you just want to kind of give us an overview of who we're looking at, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail on each of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Gremio. I think we're looking at them first up, aren't we? And then we've got Internacional, and then we have Juventude, who have just come up to Serie A. So yeah, those are the three. Obviously, like you mentioned, they're not actually in Porto Alegre, but yeah, we're grouping them all in with Gremio and Internacional. So yeah, they're the three.
That's it. So, yeah, we'll start, like you say, with Gremio, who are the most, well, actually, the biggest club, it seems to be, you'd have to say, but not necessarily the most kind of successful. But yeah, for to all intents and purposes, the kind of the biggest. So, 2 Serie A titles from Gremio, but not for a while. The last one was '96, I think. So it was a little bit of a way ago since they last won it. They've won 5 Copa do Brazils, which is actually the second most of any club, so only behind Cruzeiro. So that's quite a feather in the cap. Copa Libertadores, they've won 3. So again, the continent's biggest trophy, the biggest tournament, they've won it 3 times. So that's quite impressive as well. They also won the Club World Cup on one of those occasions, so they followed up the Copa Libertadores, sorry, with the Club World Cup win. And then we look at the regional trophies. So remember, in Rio, it's the Carioca. In Sao Paulo, it's the Paulista. So in Rio Grande do Sul, it's the Campeonato Gaucho. So that's what they call the regional trophy.
It's
So
going on at
Gremio,
it's going on at the moment. Sorry, James. It's going on at the moment, isn't it?
it is, yeah. I think.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I'm sure it is because we had a lot, didn't we? And the
Yeah.
Carioca and the Paulista were both underway, so I think they all run at the same time, just before
It
the season.
seems
Yeah,
that way, doesn't it? But anyway, carry on with what you were saying.
yeah. We'll have to check on how it's going. Actually, I'm not sure. We
Yeah.
can get that up, I'm sure. So yeah, they won 42 Campeonato Gauchos, which is a bit less than Internacional, but still obviously a good amount. So yeah, that's an overview of the kind of the things that they've won, what they've won. And George, would you like to add a little bit more colour, and we'll have a bit of a back and forth about Gremio?
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, as we've done in previous episodes, I've gathered a bit of information about Gremio, or Gremio Football Porto Alegres, I think is the full name of the club. Founded in the very early 1900s, 1903. Brazil's, I think, oldest football team, actually. So,
Wow.
so yeah, so basically, it was a bit of a strange story about how it all came about. It was a man called Candido Diaz. He loved football basically, and he went to watch a match of I think it was called at the time Sport Club Rio Grande, which eventually came into I think become Gremio. Um, he seemed to be the only man who had a football for some reason, because they were playing a match and the football deflated. So he basically lent his football to them to continue the game. And after the match, he talked to 32 people. Well, a few days later, in a pub, I think, at a local restaurant. Sorry, it was, and that was a few days after this game that he'd seen. And they met and they formed the team then, Gremio Football Porto Alegres, and that was so basically it was formed then. It was German, German, the German community basically who formed the team, and I found it interesting, James, about reading about the. I thought, oh wow, I learned something about that because I didn't realize it was such a German population in Brazil, and it's actually the fourth biggest of people coming over from overseas after I think Spain, Portugal, and I think Italy. So there's a big German following in there in Porto Alegre, and this is where Gremio was formed.
Yeah, it is interesting. I wouldn't have known. I mean, I only know a little because, as we'll touch on later, Alison Becker, Liverpool
Yeah,
goalkeeper, is obviously from the area. He's actually from
yeah,
Novo Hamburgo, who one of the smaller teams in kind of the Rio Grande do Sul. And obviously Becker's a German name, isn't it? You know, Boris Becker.
yes,
It's a German name, and Novo Hamburgo as well is obviously a new Hamburg kind of thing. So I knew a little of that just because I'd looked up kind of his background a bit in the past. But yeah, I did, it's hard to imagine kind of, I'm sure there's a big reason why, but it's kind of hard to imagine why really. But it was originally kind of a German-based team. Like you say, it was kind of aimed at Germans and kind of that kind of population. And they initially, I think, didn't really allow or kind of discourage other people, kind of locals or, like you say, maybe Italian origins or Portuguese origins from kind of following the club. And I think
right.
it's much more diverse nowadays, but I think it was originally really supported by kind of the German community, and that's what it was really for. But yeah, you don't really think of that as something in South America, but yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it did. It did surprise me, I'll be honest. And when I read up about it being the fourth most popular, sort of immigration countries, if you like, to Brazil, it surprised me. But like you said about Allison and that, obviously, so he's obviously got German descendants, descendant from German
Probably.
sort of people, probably. So yeah, very interesting. But that's where the club was kind of founded. Obviously, the current stadium, they moved in 2013 to the area do Gremio, which is a capacity. It's a fairly big one of 55,225. So yeah, so it's a big stadium. The current manager, as I like to have a little look at, these managers, and you've mentioned it before, James. Don't have a look at too much into the managers because they change all the time. The current manager of Gremio is Renato Portalappi, 61-year-old. I think he's a former Brazilian international player, but he's in his fourth spell of in charge of Gremio. This particular spell since September of 2022. So they just seem to,
Yeah.
knock about, don't they? They're all, and I forgot actually that they came second. They were only a couple of points behind Palmeiras in the end. So yeah, they did pretty well last season. So he's obviously doing something right, Renato Portaluppi.
Yeah,
Portaluppi, I think his name. Which again sounds kind of like Italian, doesn't it? Really, maybe
yeah, it does. Yeah,
Portaluppi. Yeah.
yeah, they had
So
a good season under Portaluppi or whatever his name is.
yeah, I
Well,
think it
yeah,
is Portaluppi, Renato Portaluppi. Yeah.
Portaluppi. We'll have to have a look at that. Another guy who was in, you say, four different spells, and it doesn't seem that
Yeah.
uncommon. Luis
No,
Felipe Scolari is a name which might ring a bell for you,
yeah,
George, and he was
absolutely.
he was in charge for four different spells as well. I don't know when the most recent was. It wasn't that long ago, but he
20,
won them. Go on.
2021 was the most recent time that Scolari was there. So I think he wasn't there for that long, and he departed when he took over when they were bottom of the table, I think, at that particular season, and
Yeah.
then he only managed to take them second bottom, and then I think he left. So, but yeah, I think, did you say four different spells as well?
Four spells. I think they're all relatively brief spells, but he did win the Copa Libertadores in one of the spells. I think 96, 95, 96, something like that. So he was, yeah, he's celebrated for that reason. But again, he wasn't there for all that long. Um, but yeah, it's a huge club to be a part of. I was reading that it's actually, we've covered Rio and we've covered Sao Paulo, and actually Gremio is the biggest club, or seen as the biggest club outside of the two kind of the bigger forces. The Sao Paulo Rio axis. Gremio are the biggest club outside of that, basically. So they have won everything that there is to win, kind of in the game for Brazilian club, and that's represented in the badge. They've got 3 stars above the badge, so there's a gold star, a silver star, and a bronze star. The gold one represents the Club World Cup victories, so the kind of the global victories. The silver one is the continental victories, so the Copa Libertadores, and the bronze one is the national victories, so the Serie A titles and the Copa do Brasil. So they're very proud of kind of having won everything and being this kind of big club outside of the kind of the huge cities. So, and I think that still continues today. Like you said, second last season, very close to winning it. Luis Suarez was
Yeah,
kind of the figurehead. Obviously, he's left now, so we're
yeah.
interested to see how they pick up next season, and obviously
Well,
we'll take them.
yeah, well, I think that they've got Costa in, haven't they, as almost like a replacement for Suarez, Diego Costa. So it'll be interesting, like you said, to see how he does. And they had a great season last time. Really, I think it's like you said, it's one of the most. Do you say it was one of the most popular outside of
The most
those
popular,
two?
apparently,
Yeah,
yeah,
so it's
the most
because
popular.
you look at the Brazilian football, everybody you would be able surely to recognise Grêmio and the club badge, the colours, and everything like that. So I can understand why that would be the case, really, because I think people outside in Europe will recognise Grêmio, even if you're probably not into football, into football so much. These symbols do seem to be recognisable. So, yeah, but I mean, just briefly, you mentioned Scolari, James, about and he was really popular. Really, he won a lot of trophies with Brazil. Basically, with Grêmio, six in all. I think he won, like you said, but he was criticised really by his style of play. His teams played a lot of un-Brazilian style football. It was seen as quite un-Brazilian, like. But yeah, he was really well. He was really successful. Obviously, interesting to see him obviously go into the Premier League. Obviously, with Chelsea, you don't
Yeah,
often see that really. The Brazilian managers come across to England, and I can't remember how he did really with Chelsea, but
he did
it's
terribly. He was sacked after, I think he was sacked before Christmas or something. He didn't last long. He
really,
didn't do a
yeah.
good job.
It's different because he's knocked about again. I mean, he's old now, isn't he? He's relatively old. He's getting on. So I mean, he's still managing in Serie A now, isn't he? Last season. So yeah, it's. But I thought that was interesting. I kind of like him, to be fair. And
Yeah.
I was interested to do a bit of reading on how he did at Gremio, really.
Yeah. You mentioned about the kind of the colours; they are kind of iconic. It's a rare combination that you see really in any football club. I don't think there is another one. A blue, like a deep blue, and a black with the white kind of stripe in between. But they were initially apparently inspired by Exeter City. And I'm not
Right.
sure why that was. I couldn't find out why that really was, but an Exeter playing white and red, I think. But it
Yeah,
must
it
have been
is.
way back in the day. I think they were the same kind of colours, and that was the reason for it, apparently. But I couldn't find any more info on that. So if anybody knows the answer, let us know kind of what that is. But apparently it's to do with Exeter City, yeah, which is not a link that
Right.
you would make again. But yeah, there you go. That's apparently the story.
Yeah, well, that's a good bit of info, that, isn't it? I didn't know anything about that. So yeah, who'd have thought? Because Exeter, not very glamorous. And sorry, any Exeter fans listening,
No,
but it's compared to what Gremio in Porto Alegre. It's definitely not as glamorous. But
that's
yeah, but as I like to do as well. I mean, I've looked at some notable. Graduates who have come through the youth academy, and it's one I couldn't really find that many of sort of recent times. There's Ronaldinho, isn't there? Obviously, that I think came through at Gremio, but the only one I could really find, and it's one that you'll know, James, is Arthur Mello, who obviously played at your club, didn't he? Well, really didn't play much,
Hmm. No, he
but
didn't.
he was a 13-minute, I think a 13-minute. Only one appearance in the Champions League, wasn't it, for him at Liverpool? But he came through at Gremio. Obviously, he's had quite a interesting and well-travelled career with Barcelona and Juventus, Liverpool. He's on loan at Fiorentina at the moment. But yeah, he was. I don't know if you know of any more, but he was the only one I could really find. Obviously, Brazilian international as well.
Yeah, well, Arthur was good for Gremio. Arthur won them the Copa Libertadores. I can't remember the year. Apologies, everybody. I think it was 2016. Might have been 2017. Before he went to Barca, he was part of the
Yeah,
team that won the Libertadores. They're doing really well at Fiorentina actually now. But yeah, there's a
yeah,
couple more. I mean, Ronaldinho is the massive one.
yeah, yeah,
He is the symbol of Gremio. I don't think he was there for probably the first 3 or 4 years of his career, and then he left for PSG. But
yeah,
obviously, one of the best players of all time, really. Ballon
yeah.
d'Or winner, World Cup winner, incredible footballer, and he's the most famous kind of son of Gremio. But there are a couple more. Lucas Leiva, who
Oh
again,
yeah, right.
Liverpool player. signed for Liverpool directly from Gremio, which was kind of strange at the time, especially for Liverpool. And it's a reason why Gremio is kind of stuck in my mind, because Liverpool signed him directly from there. And you look and think, never heard of this guy. And Gremio, I just remember seeing old footage of him in the kind of the blue and the black shirt. So, sorry, so he was one who came through. Another one was Everton, who was at Benfica.
Oh,
He now
yeah.
plays for Flamengo. He was part of that Copa Libertadores winning team as well. So he was around. Pepe, who plays at Porto, not the Pepe, he's a winger. Pepe came from Gremio as well. Douglas Costa is probably a more famous one.
Douglas Costa,
Who was
right.
back in Brazil, but I can't remember where he's gone to. But
Yeah,
obviously,
he
Bayern
played
Juventus.
he played in America for a little bit, didn't he? Briefly, I think.
Galaxy, was it?
Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
was
but
LA Galaxy, wasn't it?
he's another one,
Oh,
and also Anderson of Man United fame. So remember the midfielder Anderson?
yes, of course I do.
Midfielder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah.
So
All
they
right,
have had
okay.
a few
Right,
kind of
yeah.
notable ones of kind of modern times. Emerson as
Mm.
well. I don't know if you remember Emerson. He moved around quite a bit, but he played for Bayer Leverkusen, Real Madrid, AC
Yes,
Milan,
he was a Brazilian
Roma.
international. He was a defender, wasn't he?
He
Played
was.
for
He was a
Brazilian
midfielder,
international.
defensive midfielder. But
Oh,
yeah, guy.
yeah,
He was.
yeah.
You recognise him. You know his face.
Yeah.
Emerson.
I know, yeah, I can picture him now as you're saying
Yeah,
it. So yeah, I do remember him. But yeah,
yeah. He
obviously,
was
I
one.
mean, yeah, obviously they've had a few then, fair few. I mean, yeah, that's very obviously, like I said, Ronaldinho being the very very top. I don't think you can come close to beating him at all, can you? Really? But
No, definitely
they can
not. No.
try. They can try.
Oh, they can try all they want, George. They're not going to get. They're not going to beat
No,
him.
a fantastic
So
player.
I know you like to get a fact in about the president. Did you manage to find anything about the kind of the president of
You know
Gremio?
what? I didn't actually, James, and I think I've been a bit
Oh,
disappointed with all three of the clubs today because I haven't found any interesting little facts about the president. It is quite hard to find out information about them. The current
yeah.
president of Gremio is Alberto Guerrera, and he's been in charge since January of last year. So yeah, any Gremio fans listening or watching this, let me know any more information about him. Literally, I only know his name. To be fair, couldn't even find his age. To be honest with you.
Well,
So,
it makes the facts all the more special when we get them anyway, doesn't it? So
well, that's it, isn't it? It's all about can you get facts on these things? It's not easy sometimes to get it, is it? So,
not
yeah,
from where
it's
we.
good. No, definitely not. And obviously, coming from looking at outside in, it's difficult, isn't it? But like I said, anybody let us know a bit more information about him or the club or whatever. It's great to hear from people.
That's right. So yeah, that's Gremio, big side. We'll look to see if they can better their runner-up finish from last season. So moving on then to their great Porto Alegre rivals, Internacional. Not to be mistaken with Internazionale of Milan. So Internacional, like I said with Gremio, one of the most successful, but not overly so. They have won 3 Serie A titles, which is one more than Gremio, but not since 1979. So they won 3 in 1970s, 75, 76, 79. The 79 win was actually the only undefeated season in Brazilian football history. So they went on invincible season in 79,
Wow.
but haven't won it since. So, they got it all out the way and then haven't been able to do it since. But Copa do Brazils, they've won just the one. So, again, not overly successful. Copa Libertadores, they have won 2, which is pretty impressive. And they were both in the relatively modern era. I think 2006, 2010 were the 2 wins. So relatively modern, despite not being particularly that competitive on home soil. Club World Cup, they have won 1 as well, which was in 2007 or 2006. It was
It was
2000.
2006 once against
The December they beat
Barcelona.
Barcelona. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a
Wow.
big moment. That was a big moment for them. And then like I said, the Campeonato Gaucho, they've won more than Gremio, so they've won 45 titles in that. And they've also won 1 Copa Sudamericana, which is, like we said last week, it's kind of the Europa League to the Copa Libertadores as Champions League. They've won one of those as well. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of their kind of success, their trophy cabinet. So George, what have you been able to find out about Internacional?
Well, again, James, it's an interesting sort of story as to how the club was kind of founded. First of all, the full name, Sport Club Internacional, or Internacional Inter de Porto Alegre, or just like you said, Inter, obviously not to be confused with Internazionale of Italy, obviously. The club was founded a little bit later than Gremio, just a few years, 1909, by the Pope brothers, three of them. Pope brothers, Luis, Jose, and Henrique. Italian descent, again, it's interesting. Like we said, so many teams founded by European, immigrants kind of thing. Basically, it was the only club in the city, basically, that they could allow them into, or that they couldn't find another club, that allowed them to play. A lot of them were, like you said, German clubs, basically. So they decided to form their own one, basically. And that was International. Called it International because it was open to everybody. So they didn't want it to be, exclusive to a certain certain people from a certain country. So yeah, very, very interesting. Currently play the home games at the Estadio Jose Pinheiro Border, better known as Beria Rio, which means Riverside, obviously. Beira Rio. So Riverside, not to be confused, of course, with Middlesbrough Stadium. Not that I'm sure it looks completely different to
it'll be less glamorous. The Beira Rio.
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure.
You can see why Juninho wanted to. They had all those Brazilians, to be fair, didn't they?
They did, yeah.
In the kind of 2000s, Middlesbrough. So maybe, and actually, one of them who I'll mention might have been very much at home. But yeah, we'll look at that when we look at the former players. So
yeah. I mean, of course, yeah, because they did. They had a few for the time, didn't they? Likes of Juninho, and all them. So yeah, but an interesting story to as it was, founded. The stadium itself, capacity 49,055, so just short of 50,000. It actually hosted 5 games in the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. I didn't catch which games they were. I don't know if England played there at all, but they've had it international since 1969, and then the Brazilian national team to this day still occasionally uses it for games, sort of as and when. I'm not sure how they decide when they're going to play there, but it is used for the Brazilian national side as well. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a good stadium by all accounts. It took a long time to build. I think I was reading that the supporters kind of chipped in and the supporters helped to build it, which was quite nice. If you go back to that and you look at the kind of the reasoning for the name and all that kind of thing, they sound like quite a kind of an inclusive club. I think one of the nicknames again was Club de Povo or something, Club of the People. And I think 3 of them that we've looked at so far have had that. So they all seem to have this kind of a feeling of being for the people. But apparently the supporters donated bricks and iron bars and cement and that kind of thing to help build the Beira Rio. And it took them 10 years to build it. So, yeah, the Riverside Stadium, interesting kind of parallels. I don't know whether anybody's drawn them before, but yeah, it's a funny one to look at. But they are called the Colorados as well, so that's another one of their nicknames. Just the Reds, basically.
The Reds. Yeah.
So I've already kind of chosen 3 or 4 different teams to support. Well, actually, no, that's not true, is it? I've chosen two different ones to support, and but I was thinking perhaps you've chosen International. Well, I've chosen Fluminense and then Vasco.
Yeah.
And then last week I liked Corinthians as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe I should support International. Just the Reds, that's That's kind of the team for me, perhaps. But they have another one as well, which I kind of like, which was Rolo Compressor, the steamroller, which was given to them after they became dominant in the 40s, apparently. So they were the steamroller of the team, and I think that stuck a little bit. Rolo Compressor. And
Ah,
they're also called Celero de Aces, which I'm not sure, something about a factory or a barn, maybe of aces. I
right.
couldn't get to the bottom of that one. So again, anybody let us know if you do know anything about that.
Yeah, because it's interesting to learn about it. And like I said, obviously they wanted it to be, for everybody, like you said, the club, because they were probably sick of being turned away from teams and couldn't get in them. So they thought, heck, let's just make our own one up. You know what I mean? It's at the time where you could
Why
kind of
not?
do that. You know what I mean? I mean, it'd be great if you can do it now, but it's incredibly difficult. Um, but yeah, to be fair, I didn't realize how call me kind of ignorant, but I didn't realize how big this club was actually, to be fair, until I started reading about it. Seems like a huge history, obviously. Recently, not very successful, but in the past, very successful and more successful than I realized, definitely. But if we go into like the current situation, current manager Eduardo Coudet, who's an Argentinian manager, former player himself, spent a lot of his playing days, I think, in his native Argentina, flirted with, spells in Mexico, and again into his managerial career, mainly in Argentina, little bits in Mexico, and then interestingly, Celta Vigo. For a little while, that was his only venture outside of like Argentina and well, South America, if you like, really. It's in his second spell as international manager. This spell since July of last year, so he's only been there a short time in this spell. So yeah, again, I think he was maybe an Argentine international. I'm not sure, but he definitely spent a lot of time playing in Argentina. So yeah,
Good, yeah, very good. Well, where did they finish last year? I didn't see. Actually, I think they were kind of mid-table as
I'm not
well.
certain. If you just bear with me, James, I can have a look at that.
Yeah, I think
Just
they were kind
just
of
a
mid-table.
second.
They're not one of the kind of like you say, lots of history, and those two Copa Libertadores wins are especially impressive because of the recency of them. A lot of these teams are historical and have won plenty of continental titles, but they tend to be a long time in the past. But yeah, they won 2006, they won 2010, and obviously won the Club World Cup against that Barcelona team, and that was really impressive at the time. I mean, the European teams don't tend to take it that seriously, and I had a quick look. It wasn't a bit. I mean, it was before Messi, it was before Guardiola, it was before that proper dream team of Barcelona. Well, not the dream team of the '90s, but the team that's widely regarded as one of the best ever, with Busquets and Iniesta and Xavi. Xavi was on the bench,
Yeah,
for example, in that game, and Ronaldinho was playing, which would have probably stung him quite a bit, being a Gremio boy, losing
definitely. Yeah.
final. But yeah, recently they've not been that great, but we'll see if they can have a bit of a turnaround and get back up there. Did you manage to see where they finished last year?
Yeah, I mean, James, I mean, you're going to be left with egg on your face here because you say recently they haven't been that good. In fact, um, two of the last four seasons they've actually finished in second position. In
Wow, there you
20
go.
in 2020, then they finished 12th in 2021, second again in 2022, and then ninth last season. So a bit of a drop off, sort of mid table. But
Yeah.
we talk about the Gaucho, which is obviously currently happening. They play Thursday morning, early hours of Thursday morning here against
Mm,
Brazil de Pelotas. They are currently top of the Gaucho at the moment, followed by Gremio, and then followed by Juventud. So
mm.
there's only 3 points in it. So yeah, but yeah, like you
Well,
said, again, I didn't realize how well and how good they were doing. Obviously, a little bit of a drop off last time.
Yeah, well,
but
it
of
seems they have
recent
it in them. I mean,
times.
the Gaucho is not a surprise just because since 1955, only three teams have won it who haven't been Gremio or Inter. So it's really dominated by them, and Inter have won the most, more than Gremio. So yeah, very good. They seem to have one season on, one season off a little bit then. So perhaps this season they'll come back roaring. If they were ninth last year, maybe they'll come back into it. But just moving on to the kind of the players, did you manage to have a look and see any kind of notable names who have come through Inter?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the one you've mentioned, and the one it clicked to me when because I hadn't realised this, but it clicked to me when you mentioned it last episode last week, just at the very end, as a little bit of a clue to what we were looking at. Obviously, Alison Becker is the one, and not the only one, but the only sort of notable one I could find. There is another lad I'd just speak about, but Alison, yeah, I mean, fantastic player, over 100 appearances for International before moving to Roma. Obviously, then picked up by Liverpool in 2018, and the rest is history. You know, he's a fabulous goalkeeper, goal-scoring goalkeeper, as we've covered before as well on the podcast in previous episodes. But yeah, I mean, he was the household name that I could see anyway. But obviously, fantastic, celebrated Brazilian international goalkeeper, won trophies and trophies and trophies, hasn't he? But the other lad I'd like to speak of, who plays for Real Madrid, I don't know if you know this lad's name, James, but it was a name that I had never heard before. Young lad, 19-year-old right back Vinicius Tobias. Came through at International before going to Shakhtar Donetsk in Ukraine in 2022. Before then going on to Real Madrid, I think. Came to Real Madrid, I think, in 2022. Was on the bench recent as the back end of last year in a Champions League game against Union Berlin. But I think he might have made one appearance or just a handful, maybe, or one or two appearances for the first team at Madrid. But maybe a name to keep an eye on, Vinicius Tobias.
Yeah, I did come across him actually. Yeah, that's
Oh, did you?
definitely
Yeah,
one to keep an eye on. We'll see how he gets on. I managed to pick up a couple more. So Allison, of course,
yeah,
was kind of broke through. Really, he wasn't that young actually, but he was there. Goalkeepers come on later, so I think he was kind of early 20s, 22, 23 maybe. But he actually took over the position from his brother Muriel, who
right.
was
All
the
right,
goalkeeper before. So they kind of went back and forth. Allison was back up to Muriel, and then they kind of switched it. So Allison was the first choice, Muriel was
right.
reserve, which was quite a nice little bit. But there is a couple of names, and I'm sure you'll recognise one of them at least. I think a couple of them. The first one is Falcao, who was a 1982 World Cup star, one of the greats in defensive midfield, Falcao, of that kind of celebrated team, which never won the World Cup, but which should have done. So he was at Roma later in his career, and he was a great player for Inter. And then Alexander Pato, who I'm sure you'll remember, the Duck.
Yes, yeah.
Pato, who might still be playing actually. I know he was around quite recently, but he's been all over the shop. AC Milan kind of famously went from Inter to AC, which is not often recommended, but obviously the other Inter. So from International to Milan, he was part of the team that won the Club World Cup
Wow.
in 2006 as well. So yeah, Alexander Pato was billed as a massive, big wonder kid star and never quite really hit the heights. But he was one. Another one who I say will be feeling at home at the Riverside is Fabio Rockenbach, who you might
Oh,
remember.
yes, of course.
Yeah.
Rockenbach, yes, I
Played
do
for
remember him.
Barca for a bit, and yeah, was at Middlesbrough
Yep.
mid late 2000s or something like that. Yeah, so he went from the Riverside, brought up through the academy, and went on to the Riverside. So
Wow,
I
yeah,
don't think he stayed
absolutely.
there
Wow.
that long. I think he must have been sold a bit of a dream. Got there and realised it wasn't quite Porto Alegre, and jetted off not too long after. But yeah, a
Well,
few names there.
you can't blame him. To be fair, I mean, bit of a difference between Porto Alegre and Middlesbrough, but they were playing sort of samba football, weren't they? I suppose, like you said at the time, lots of Brazilian influence, and definitely an interesting story to have a look at. I know we did speak about looking into specific players at some stage and sort of their stories in how perhaps they came to the Premier League, maybe, or something like that, perhaps later on in the podcast, and see how that goes. Just interestingly, you mentioned Pato. He's back in Brazil playing for Sao Paulo.
Is he?
Just moved there in December of last year, so he's not been there
Wow.
long. Probably, obviously, in readiness for this season. So, yeah, Pato, 34. He's like you said, he knocked about all over the shop, really. Recent. Sorry, Sorry, no, he did play there. He's just left actually.
Oh, is
Last,
he?
yeah. So he's just left in December
Mhm.
of last year, May to December last year. So yeah, he was playing in America with Orlando before that, but he's 34 now. So yeah, he's a bit. He's getting on a bit. That's
He is. Okay, well, that's a shame, but yeah, maybe he'll crop up at some stage later on. Well, finally, we're going to take a quick look at the last team of the kind of the Rio Grande do Sul area, who are in Serie A this year. And like you said at the start of the show, they've just come up, and they're called Juventude. So, Juventude, possibly a little bit of a shorter kind of segment for us. They, in terms of titles won, they've only ever won two. They did win the Gaucho one time, and they also won the Copa do Brasil, which was the biggest kind of moment in their history, really, in 1999. So they won the
wow.
Gaucho in '98, and they won the Copa do Brasil in '99. So it was a big couple of years for them. Aside from that, they haven't done much. But yeah, George, what were you able to find out about Juventud?
So Juventud, yeah, it's again, like you said, a bit of a shorter probably piece of this one. Really, obviously, just promoted to Serie A for the 2024 season. Exporte Club Juventud, or just Juventud, based in Caxias. We did have a discussion how to pronounce that earlier on, but I have forgotten how to say it. Caxias, and
Oh,
again, anybody, Caxias do Sul. It's a 1 hour, 49-minute drive from Porto Alegre. The rival team is Caxias. They currently playing in Serie D, but they are in the Gaucho playing with the likes of Internacional and Gremio as well. I think they do play them, or they did play them. I think they do play them in a couple of days, actually. So that might be one to keep an eye on. Founded in on June the 29th, again a little bit later than the previous two we've looked at in 1913. Again, by people who are descendants of Italian immigrants, 35 people, 35 youngsters from Caxias do Sul. They gathered and formed Juventud with a chap named Antonio Chiaradia Neto as who was chosen as the president. So I don't know how, did they do a game of rock, paper, scissors to work that out? I don't know. But the current stadium, Estadio Alfredo Giaconi, which is named after a former player, manager, and director of the club in the 1930s and 40s. So a well celebrated figure, got even the stadium named after him. What a big accolade that is. It's a capacity of 19,924, so just short of 20,000. So a significant drop in the capacity numbers. Obviously, it would be to be expected. A much smaller club, with the greatest of respect, obviously, to them. The current manager, Roger Mercado, recently appointed just last month. Obviously, the former manager, who I think Caprini is his name, he got them promoted and has now gone off to Sao Paulo. So,
Oh, wow.
so yeah, so he's recently been. I think again, Roger Machado is a Gremio, is more of a Gremio man. I think he's had a couple of spells in charge of them and player as well.
Mm.
A one-time Brazilian international. I think it came in a friendly game. His cap for his country. The current president again couldn't find much information on him, but he's a man named Walter Dal Zotto Jr. So there you go, James. A lot of information to take in there, but hopefully you enjoyed it and everybody did listen.
Well, I certainly did. I can't speak for the people who are listening, but
No.
yeah, lots of useful information. We'll see how he gets on there at Sao Paulo. A bit of a jump up for him, but yeah, biggish club it seems. I mean, football is religion in Brazil, isn't it? So every club at this level has a
Mhm.
passionate fan base and has kind of diehard supporters and has had some success. They seem to have been bouncing about a little bit of the last couple of years anyway. I think they went up in 2021. They went down again. I think they came back up. So they've been bouncing about, but they're not brand new to this level. They are, they have been about this level before. Like I say, they've won a cup, they've won a gaucho, but they were down in Serie D for as recently as 2013. So they've been down as well, down the depths. And as you'll know as a Leeds fan, it can reinforce the kind of the support of a club, or it can go the other way as well. But they're known as apparently the papada, which is a bit of a colloquial term for jowls, for kind of jowls and talking. Apparently they talk a
Oh.
lot, but they don't back it up with anything. But
Oh,
this
wow.
was a nickname apparently given to them by rival fans, and one which they kind of claim back as their own. So
Right.
papada.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's
Oh.
kind of what they're called. Yeah, I did
Yeah,
find a little bit out. Oh, go on.
it is an interesting kind of club, really, in its own way. Probably not the most attractive of teams, but you know, it's interesting the same way. And like you said, they've been down very down low to Serie D and made the way up in terms of sort of 10-year period. So it's quite an impressive achievement that really. Like you said, returned to the top division after an absence of 13 years. So in 2021, I think that was, and then they've since been relegated again and come back up, obviously this time. So yeah, it's interesting. Quite like the colours they play in. I think it's white and green, isn't it? Striped. So Real
Yeah.
Betis sort of esque, isn't it? So
That's true, yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
another club they resemble, I mean, not necessarily, but the green is kind of in keeping with another Brazilian giant we've already touched on, Palmeiras. And they do have a bit
yes.
of a link with Palmeiras because they were sponsored in the 90s, Palmeiras initially by Parmalat, who I don't know if you remember, they sponsored Parma as well. You remember the famous Parma shirts, Parmalat, the
Oh
company.
yes,
So
right.
they
Oh right.
sponsor
Okay.
Palmeiras, and they also went on to partner with Juventud,
Mm.
and this led to kind of a successful period for Juventud. But it was partly
Oh.
because they garnered some kind of relationship with Palmeiras, in which Palmeiras would loan them players, or give them kind of young up and coming players. So they got players who they wouldn't necessarily have been able to get, all because of this partnership with Parmalat. And I think they apparently
Oh.
helped develop the Draconi, the stadium, a little bit as well. So yeah, it ended. I don't know if it ended badly or anything like that, but they do have a bit of a connection with Palmeiras through the 90s. So an
Right.
interesting little aside is that Cafu was one of the players who was transferred, but Cafu had a bit of a mix-up. He was at Real Zaragoza at the time, and Palmeiras wanted to sign him, but for some reason, they thought they tried to get their way around the system, and they parked him at Juventud in the time for the time being. They tried to get
Oh.
away from a fine or something like that, but they
Wow.
didn't get away with it. So he played for Juventud for 2 or 3 games before moving on to Palmeiras. But yeah, they didn't get away with it. It was some kind of elaborate scheme, and it didn't quite work. But
Oh
yeah,
wow.
Cafu
Okay.
was one of the players who's played for them, probably the most famous that I could come up with. Anyway, I don't know if you've only well, yeah, I don't know if you came up with any who've come
Couldn't
through it.
couldn't find any, James. Unsurprisingly, really. I'm sure they've obviously got legends in their own right, but in terms of players that have come and played in Europe. Obviously, you mentioned Cafu, which is incredible. But other than that, no, I couldn't honestly find anything if I'm being brutally honest.
Well, I found one which was
Oh,
Alex Telles, Alex Telles,
right,
who
okay,
was at Man United, was at
yeah,
Porto, went to Man United. I can't remember where he is now. He's on loan, maybe Sevilla or something.
I think,
Um, but
yeah,
he came through the youth ranks at Juventud, so
right.
he's the best known name. There's been a few, I think, lesser known, but yeah, Alex Telles will definitely was the name that stood out when I was having a little look through. So yeah,
Alex Tellers playing in Saudi Arabia with
oh, is he
Ronaldo at the moment. Yeah, Al
Al
Nassr.
Nassr?
Yeah, yeah,
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. He had a decent
and
career in Europe on the back of his early days at Juventud, anyway. So, and definitely a nice little club to keep an eye out for. And definitely very much smaller than their two massive neighbours in Porto Alegre, but one well worth covering as well. And yeah,
yeah.
we'll keep a close eye on if they manage to stay up.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to look at the other. I mean, I think before the season starts, I think we're going to try and squeeze in a maybe an episode where we look at the promoted sides. So we'll have another
Yeah.
look at Juventud in terms of more like recent times in the squad it currently has at the moment and everything like that. I'm sure, but they do play as we're recording this. They do play tonight
Mm.
in the Gaucho against Sao Luis. So it's a bit of a late kickoff here,
Mm.
but it might be one to check out. As you wake up in the morning, perhaps, and see how they've got on. They did
Yeah.
play Gremio actually in a game in the Gaucho a few weeks ago, which Gremio won 1-0. So a tight game, really. But
Mm.
and that one I mentioned against the great rivals, Caxius, is on Monday, the 19th of February. So again, another one to keep an eye on. But like I said, they are Caxius in 3 divisions below them at the moment. So it's a bit of probably a non-event. Big game for them, as it usually is for the smaller teams out the 2 in the derbies.
For sure. Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye, and we'll keep an eye on, which we didn't mention, the big derby between Inter and Gremio as well, the Grenell
Yes.
they call it. That's of course obviously one of Brazil's biggest derbies and most heated derbies. So we'll be covering that. Perhaps we might have a special episode looking at the derbies. We'll see how it goes. But for now,
Yeah.
we're just about out of time. So
Yep.
we'll love you and leave you. So it's been another good episode. I think we've covered we're getting there now. We're over halfway through the clubs of Serie A at the minute, aren't we? So
Mm-hmm.
we'll have a look next week and see who we're getting on with. Have you any final thoughts just to end the show, George?
Yeah, it's been fantastic, James. Another good episode, another good learning experience. I think for both of us, and 3 very good sides there. It's looking forward to seeing how they get on this time, and hopefully one day, Porto Alegre will be something that we might see with his own eyes. You never know.
Yeah, well, that would be nice. Porto Alegre, here we come. For now,
Absolutely.
goodbye, everybody.
Bye bye.